Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode. We have a debate, but it's a open debate. Professor Donald is a very famous speaker for World Talent Economy Forum, and we hope next year March in our conference we want to see him in South Asia because we are launching one of the largest event in South Asia, and we have our another world famous speaker, Mr. Adam. Today's our debate on universal healthcare. It's an open debate. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Donald.
Well, I think that the the title was "Is Universal Health Care a Human Right?" And I'm not I'm not a philosophical expert at rights. I think that's a pretty complicated issue, but but I do know that universal health care is has economic benefits and other benefits that make it kind of a no-brainer to have it for different countries. Uh, in the United States, we don't have universal health care. And do you have universal health care in Bangladesh, Sharif?
No, we
I
don't
just
have.
I just came out with they just came out with a list of the unhappiest countries in the world, and Bangladesh was one of the 10 most unhappiest countries in the world. So the United States is not anywhere close to the top of being the happiest countries in the world. The happiest countries in the world are in the Nordic region, mostly like Finland and the Scandinavian countries like Sweden and Denmark. And all of those countries have universal health care. In the United so one thing that's interesting that I want to just mention about universal health care that's important to me is that in the United States, there's many people who are very um, uh, emotional about the idea of one kind of universal health care, which is called Medicare for all. And in the United States, we have a system where after you're 65 years old, you get this health insurance that pays 80% of your health bills, which you actually have to pay some for, but it's much lower insurance rates than it would normally be. So instead of being at the age when you're 64, let's just say before it comes in, and you don't have um, health insurance through your employer, you need to pay your own health insurance. You pay about $1,000 a month, but then when you turn 65, it goes down to about $140 a month because of Medicare, which doesn't pay everything. And so most people then buy supplemental insurance that costs another $80 or something like that a month. So it gets their overall monthly payment for healthcare down to about $220 a month. So it's not even in the best case in the United States, it's not anything like the healthcare in. I lived in Finland for a while, and the way that the healthcare there works is that it's just part of your taxes. It's invisible to you because you pay taxes every year, and they don't say, well, this part of your taxes is for healthcare. It's just a part of your taxes, and so a lot of people want that system to be universal, and yeah, I don't believe that. You'd have to show me the statistics, Ted. But the um, the there is a lot of ways to implement universal health care, and one of the ways that they implement it is in um, England and Canada specifically. They have their universal health care is um, implemented by having the government actually own the healthcare facilities. So the doctors work for the government. The healthcare facilities are owned by the government. When you go to the healthcare facilities, they're uh, um, you know, it's very interesting how people make up statistics and then just put them up with no references and no sources. That's something I'll talk about. Um, I find it incredibly um, annoying. But in any event, the most people, all the people I know, I go to Canada frequently and give talks, and they love their healthcare system. A lot of American conservatives love to make up stuff about the Canadian healthcare system and talk about how horrible it is and blah 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 because that's it's important to them for some reason that that we don't have a universal healthcare system in the United States, and that's an entirely different issue. But uh, then, so another kind of healthcare system is the kind of healthcare system that they have in Finland, which is where you basically people buy they're they're required to buy health insurance. But so that was a system like we were going to. This is well, this is the way it is in France and some other countries, and this is what they were trying to do in the United States with what they call the Affordable Care Act. Oh yeah, I should say that in the United States we have what's called the VA, the Veterans Administration, which is health care for people who've been in the military after retired military people, and it's a very large system. Serves many, I'm sure, millions of people, and it's also owned by the government. The doctors work for the government, and it varies at how good it is. It can be excellent depending on what administrations we have. There's a lot of political thing in the United States where some people believe that the government shouldn't pay for anything, and so then the VA gets worse, and then we get people that think that we should take care of our veterans, and then the VA gets better. And so when it's good, it's very, very good, and it's becomes a standard of care. It's very good, and then we there's a kind of system that we're trying to implement called the way it works is that everybody has to have insurance, and the insurance um, and and then the government becomes an insurer of last resort. So basically, people get insurance through their work. They get insurance privately, but if they can't enforce, if they don't get insurance from insurance companies, they get insurance from the government, and so the government becomes an insurance company. So it's got some similarity to Medicare for all, which is the idea that um, there's one insurance company, the government, but it allows for private insurance companies. This is what they do in France, which is considered the best medical care system in the world. Um, for and I want to say when I make that statement that the way that you can make those statements, the way when I say that, I'm talking about measurable health outcomes. So I'm talking about longevity, like how long do people live? I'm talking about infant mortality, which is how many children die what percentage of children die when they're born. I'm talking about maternal mortality, which is how many women die in childbirth. I'm talking about outcomes for various diseases. Like if a person gets a disease, how likely are they to die from that disease? I mean, how quickly do they die, and how quickly do they die from that disease? And all of these things are measurable. So you can compare countries by measuring health outcomes, which are objective measurements, and and people love to say that in the United States, for instance, they love to say that the United States has the best healthcare in the world. And in some senses, if you have enough money, the the uh, universities, research universities in the United States have some of the best trained and are doing the most cutting edge research in the world. Though, there's other countries in Europe and England and even China that are doing some amazing stuff. But Japan, but that only works if you have enough money. And so if you're looking, so the point of universal health care is the idea that even if you're poor, you should be able to get and good health care. And if you've got a country where people that are poor like get sick a lot and can't work and can't contribute to the society, it it brings everybody down. And so having good health care for everyone is is I, I don't think of it as a right so much because I'm a person that believes that when the society you live in is healthier, you're healthier. So I think it's an investment. It's an investment in yourself when you invest in society. So I think it's important factor in building a good life and a healthy world, and it's absolutely necessary to do because you can't have a system like the United States where only wealthy people get good health care. It's not. It's not.
Mhm.
Doesn't work.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, you are from Europe. So, what is the European perspective? If you share with our audience,
Sure.
I think it will be very helpful. And one important aspect, Professor Donald, you know that I'm a big fan of your work, your ethics, your contribution for the global community. I'm a big fan of your work. So, just one thing, like what I believe, like example, yes, definitely contributing for your country, always best. Yes, I'm trying to help my countries, my grassroots level people, my people. And second thing, let's say mm, Singapore in Asia, it's a very advanced nation. So when you help them, it's compared because I work in Singapore, I work in Bangladesh. It's very easy to help or contribute. But when you contribute country like Bangladesh, or example Vietnam, it's very difficult to uplift the nations. Example, our healthcare system, if you want to restructure, is very difficult. But good point is that if you can do that, definitely you will be the part of the history. That is one of our objective. Like developed nation, it's very easy to contribute. There is a system, and you fix it. But example, when a nations they are far more behind than the advanced nations, and when you contribute for them, definitely you will be part of history and you will be the legendary people for the world. So that is the things actually I always welcome uh, the developed nations people. That why don't we work together and uplift a developing nation? It's
Well,
very difficult.
I'll talk about that next time around. Really want to hear what Adam has to say. He's always extremely
Yeah. He's
interesting.
very nice. Yes, Mr. Adam, I
Uh,
want your perspective from Europe. Yeah.
sure, no problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, that makes a change. Thank you, Sharif. Thank you, thank you, Donald. Yeah, universal healthcare. Well, certainly one of my favorite aphorisms is health is wealth. Health is wealth, and that is absolutely true because without it, you can't really live your life and flourish and enjoy other kinds of wealth. So, along with universal basic income, it seems like a good idea that is in line with this age's focus on ideals like equality and making the world a fairer place. But one of the problems with anything that attempts to be universal, in my opinion, is that there is no one size fits all approach that can lift and raise everybody up, because everyone has different requirements, different dispositions, What is beneficial to the health of one person isn't necessarily beneficial to the health of someone else. And I think we need to perfect the kinks in the medical sectors. There's still a lot of corruption and malpractice and wheelings and dealings that are not Hippocratic, but are quite anti-Hippocratic, even unknowingly, and there probably always will be. And universal healthcare might be wasted on some portions of the population because, unfortunately, a lot of people simply don't care about their health. It's like so maybe that's like something that education could probably try and resolve. It's like with universal basic income, that striving to achieve something in a fertile, competitive environment it might be removed, and it risks becoming like a nanny state that arrests people's development. So we need to improve the way we do modern medicine before taking on a mega project like universal healthcare head on. And people have a bias that we have surpassed long ago the dark ages. But I think in some respects, without trying to be hyperbolic, I think we could still be in one in some areas. And a lot of the pharmaceuticals dished out to people are iatrogenic and straight up harmful sometimes, and just end up causing more side effects, which they need something else to combat, and on it goes as like a daisy chain. You start playing a game of side effects whack-a-mole. So we need to take a long, hard look and do some serious reflection and introspection. I know big, scary, big pharma is an almost a groan-worthy trope by now, but it is still an issue, unfortunately. And one has to remember, it actually hasn't been that long since we were giving mothers thalidomide, performing lobotomies, which plunges patients into a living death, essentially. Electroconvulsion. It's only been a few decades or a century between now and some of those, and the times when they were being used to treat people. But are we really ready to tackle universal healthcare when the shadow of the effects of the aforementioned so-called treatments are still being felt? How do we provide universal mental health care? Maybe the modern medicine suffers from too much of a distinction between physical health and mental health. And with regards to your question, Sharif, about Europe and my home country, the UK, of course we have NHS, which is very popular here in Great Britain. It's very popular. The NHS is almost worshipped, especially during COVID and the lockdowns and all that. So yeah, I think we've still got a long way to go, clearing up like the mess that our current infrastructure has made and left behind before we tackle maybe something so big and complicated as universal healthcare. But I'm sure we'll get there eventually. Thank you.
Oops, we lost Sharif.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, we've lost Sharif. Oh dear. I'll send him a message.
Yeah.
Oh, it's back. He's back.
Yes.
Hey.
Yes. Mr. Donald, I think that you have some interesting point you want to share with our audience.
Well, I think I think it's interesting what you're saying, because about developing countries, because the kind of problems that are in developing countries are very, very different. Like I was impressed by the effort in Bangladesh to create latrines for everyone and try and create a culture of going to the bathroom in latrines rather than outdoors, because it if human waste or waste gets in the water and you wind up drinking it, it can cause cholera and diarrhea, all kinds of bad stuff. And so just doing that alone is is healthcare. So there's I just read yesterday that there's a very, very promising malaria vaccine now that, that actually, it seems like the first one that actually prevents most cases of malaria. And that, I mean, that's incredibly exciting because um, uh, what was the country? I don't know if I can pronounce it, but it's Boca, something, an African country. They said everyone pretty much gets malaria there. And I mean, they get it repeatedly. It's like we get colds or flu or something. Malaria is just so endemic that, and, and many people die of it, but many people just are, you know, wiped out for months. It's a terrible, you get wiped out for a long time when you have malaria. So the human, like just as Adam said, health is wealth. The human ability to contribute to the world is much smaller when you have you know, a vast, really substantial portion of your population that's so sick they can't work. So it's healthcare really does, as you said, mean very, very different things for a developed country like the United States, where the question is equity, and a country like Bangladesh, where there's no real infrastructure and the health problems are significantly different. Um, I think it's hard to know. Every country is going to be different. They're going to have a different set of problems. Um, but so you need to train doctors. You need to start building clinics one by one, um, primary care clinics, and you know, start having. I have a friend who was she's Chinese, and she lived in China during the Cultural Revolution. And her father was put in prison because he had some political whatever. And she had to go live with her uncle, who was a well known acupuncturist in Singapore. And he trained her as a very young, she was very young, but he trained her in acupuncture and herbal medicine. And when she get, just to show how good she was, when she came to the United States, she was one of the first people that took the acupuncture test, and she just, you know, totally aced it. She got the best score, and she hadn't even gone to school in the United States for it or anything. She she'd learned in China. But where I'm going with that is because she was educated, they shipped her off to some horrible place where she had to live in huts that were on stilts because it was over marshland, and people were getting sick all the time. And they knew that she knew the medicine, so everybody in the village was coming to her, and she was treating everybody. So the authorities found that out, and they sent her to barefoot doctor school. And so what the Chinese did was they trained armies of barefoot doctors and sent them out all over the countryside, everywhere that they could. They trained primary care doctors. And I think they trained them in a combination of Chinese medicine and Western medicine. And I mean, that's one way of doing it, is just training armies of nurse practitioners, primary care people who can get out there and just start doing triage for people and getting the services to the people who have um, things that you can fix easily, and then taking the people who have more complex things and trying to develop a system to be able to take care of them. most things that you're going to run into are going to be simple to treat.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was muted. Yeah, I can hear a lot of street noise. I don't know if I think there's a lot of. Doesn't matter.
Not
It's
me.
fine. It's certainly not me. Yes. Yeah. When you both mentioned developed countries, or oh, it's gone really quiet now. Sorry. Yeah. When you both mentioned developed countries, or also still developing countries, rather, it reminded me of an annoying treadmill effect humans seem to stay trapped on, no matter how advanced we get, no matter how much we progress. And I think a perfect example of this is what we call diseases of civilization, sometimes colloquially named as affluenza, which is, of course, a portmanteau of affluence and influenza. And people are biased into thinking that first world nations are happier and healthier by virtue of being the first world. But unfortunately, that's not the case, because, of course, I'm sure you are aware of rates of depression and anxiety of the a lot of must develop, because I mean happy though. In the four senses.
Mr. Adam, are you with Mr. Donald? You have to take lead because I think Adam has internet issues. I think Adam has internet issues. Mr. Donald.
Mute myself. Okay. Yeah. Somebody's been asking if the increase in euthanasia in Canada is because of the Canadian, because it's correlated with the Canadian healthcare system. And I looked that up, and there's very, very little on that. And it's all comes from one, as far as I can see, one American. That he cited some statistics that have no reference that I can find. Um, so, he might have gotten them from Fox News or something, but where they make up their statistics. And but be that as it may, the article, which had anecdotal evidence, I mean, stories about people, said that the euthanasia was implemented in 2016, and there's 7 countries that have it. And the article was definitely expressing alarm that it might be being used too often, and that is something that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the healthcare system. That's completely unrelated. So that's the answer to that question.
Okay.
Um,
Mr. Donald, let's say World Talent Economy Forum, we are working as a policy research institute. So what is your advice for World Talent Economy Forum, not for our audience? Maybe we will advise or advocating for our audience how we can develop better healthcare policy, especially when we discuss about universal healthcare system.
well, it's not going to be one size fits all. So the I think the best thing to do is to look at who's the most successful. I mean, France is extremely successful. I mean, and look at it from a objective way, because you can uh, ask yourself, um, don't listen to people like tell you about how great their healthcare systems are. look at the outcomes. Look at how many. Look at the things that I mentioned: infant mortality, maternal mortality, lifespan in the United States has been going down steadily, and it's the only country in the developed world since the Industrial Revolution where lifespan has been going down. I mean, so there's something wrong with our healthcare system. And as far as I'm concerned, because that's an objective measure that doesn't look very good. And so looking at that, you'd say, well, maybe if we want to have a healthcare system, maybe the way that the United States is doing it isn't the best possible way. And then you look at the healthcare systems, but you won't be able to jump from where you are to where the developed nations are, because you probably don't have the resources to do it. So then the next question you need to ask is, how do we get from here to there? What elements of this can we implement? So, and that's what I was talking about. Is you can objectively ask yourself the question. Each country can ask themselves the question: is what are the things in our country where people are getting ill the most, that are like setting back our economy and setting back the quality of life and making our country less able to succeed, and the people in our country less able to succeed. And you can identify those, as I pointed out. And some countries, so many people are getting malaria that the countries are just stuck. They can't really go anywhere. And the introductions of mosquito nets have helped those countries dramatically. And so sometimes there's really simple solutions, and a malaria vaccine will just be just change the dynamic completely. But then once you have a vaccine, you've got to get people to take it. And so how are you going to get the vaccine out to people? You have to develop, but you don't have to have like trained surgeons to do that. You can develop a level of care that's a primary care level that's not incredibly sophisticated, like I was saying, the barefoot doctor's level, and start building towards where you want to go, because you can't get there in one leap.
Mr. Adam.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My laptop ran out of battery power. I didn't notice until it just conked out. Yeah. So to loop back around to your question, Sharif, about Europe and the UK in particular again. About 6 years ago, in 2016, the Tory government drafted something called the Psychoactive Substances Act, which was a blanket ban on all psychoactive substances except alcohol, nicotine, caffeine, poppers, even amyl nitrate and sugar, you could say, which doomed people here who had legitimate, valid reasons to need some substances that were unfortunately affected by this, like kratom, which can be used to treat pain, because it's not strictly an opiate, but an opioid, I think. Psychedelics, which are useful for mental and spiritual health, if done correctly and with intention. If universal healthcare could cover spiritual health, and in pathogens like those being similar to MDMA, like those being used to help people with PTSD, and it's so frustrating, and it's only gotten more frustrating since, because all around the world you're seeing groups of people pioneering new discoveries with these substances and finding more useful therapeutic uses for them. And the USA, or certainly many of the states, not all of them, but a lot of the states in the USA seem to be leading the way with the liberalization of psychoactive substance consumption, within a legal situation, as are countries like Portugal, and I think Mexico is quite free and easy in that regard. Um, and arguably, even simple recreational use for fun is therapeutic and medicinal potentially. Um, and we all know that recently medical marijuana has really taken off. So that's just one of the ways I think the UK is a bit of a loser compared to a lot of other countries that seem to be that have less draconian rules and laws about what to do with your own body and your own mind. Because, of course, another aphorism: "Know thyself." Could it be said that a lot of people know their own bodies and minds better than any doctor? Maybe that's not true, or maybe it's both. And I think it's just very frustrating that people they know that some of these compounds are medicinal and therapeutic for them, but they don't have access to them. I feel very frustrated with the UK, and also there's even the NHS has some corruption in it and has had the occasional scandal. And there were stories about NHS staff mishandling COVID and leading to more fatalities and misdiagnosing people, which led to some people's deaths. So yeah, like I said before, talking about thalidomide and lobotomies and such, and ECT, we are still living in an age where medicine is not, and healthcare is not as Hippocratic as it claims to be. Thank you.
Mr. Donald, I have a specific question, because when we discuss about uh, universal healthcare need some good research. You are fellow for Stanford University, so if you share some insight about Stanford hospitals and how does it work, how their research and innovations work, and how it can be helpful for the global communities. Maybe it can be a good insight for our audience.
Stanford is a big place, and it's fairly compartmentalized. And I'm not part of the hospital, but I my wife is a nurse practitioner, and so I've been I subscribe to the New England Journal of Medicine and things like that. So I do have some insight in it. I I think that the question of universal health care and research are um, they're somewhat like separate, but I think that I might be able to answer the question a little bit by uh, addressing, building on what Adam was just talking about, because what happens has happened in the developed world, England and the United States, and other developed countries, is that in order to protect us from snake oil salesmen or people who sell cures that actually don't work. Um, we've developed an infrastructure of research that to protect us from that. So there's the National Institute of Health, and then there's research organizations. So if you want to put a drug on the market or have a new drug, it has to go through um, rigorous testing, and there's good reason for that. I mean, things like the only way that you can be sure something is having an effect is by double-blind studies, large double-blind studies, or adequately large double-blind studies, and those are very, very expensive to do and time-consuming, and so it limits what you can do. But on the other hand, as Adam was pointing out, there are things that people have been using for millennia that that people at least feel that are effective. I mean, right now I get a, a newsletter called Neuroscience News, and every single solitary week there's at least 2 articles explaining why psilocybin and psychedelics rewire the brain and help depression. And it's just over and over. I mean, it's known. People have known it for thousands of years. We know, we can look at people's brains. We can see why it works. We know it's not harmful to people. There's no reason whatsoever to make that illegal. It's ridiculous. We know now that ketamine literally will one single solitary dose of ketamine is more effective for curing depression than anything that has ever been discovered. So we know these things. They're around. They've been tried. They're in some things like ketamine, for instance. It's a, what do you call it, off-label use, but it's something that's been used for decades and decades for other purposes. So we know we know what its safety profile is. So if you don't have that kind of infrastructure within your country, part of developing universal health care has to be to develop some sort of an infrastructure to protect yourself from people who are just charlatans, like the guy who's running for Senate in Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz, who hawks magic pills that'll cause you to lose weight and things like that. And then, these people are they're just frauds. They sell this stuff that doesn't do anything and make a fortune on it. And we don't want people to be taken advantage of. But on the other hand, we don't want to be blocking people from using things. So I think that if you want to do research, one of the things to really research is not just the mechanics and the statistical things that I was talking about, but ethics. And it's some sort of a look at the ethics of it. Like, look at Portugal. I mean, look at what they're doing. The drug prohibition does not work. Putting people in jail for being addicted to drugs does not do anyone any good at all. It's ridiculous. And so there's legal infrastructure to deal with medicine and the medical community is it's a matter of ethics and law, as well as simply providing the medicines and the care that people need. You're muted.
Yes, Mr. Adam, actually, try to understand, like, when we work, my life is still not settled. Actually, I have to work from many different places. But some point, speaker actually complain there is a sound, there is a noise. And when I muted and again, I have to unmute is problem. So better we just adjust with the system. I'm developing my studio by this week. So hopefully it will not be problem at all. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. Yeah, one of my other concerns with the future of healthcare or near future healthcare involves some guidelines and plans laid out by monoliths like, for example, the World Economic Forum. We have to ask ourselves, do groups like these, including our own governments, do they really give a damn about our health, whether it's physical, mental, spiritual, or cultural health? One of the most interesting moral and ethical tug of wars happening right now is to do with diet, specifically the push to popularize vegan diets against champions of meat eating, like practitioners of the carnivore diet, and people who simply don't want to eat anything lab grown or are happy to continue eating how they have always eaten. And obviously, and of course, the whole insect thing is they're trying to popularize it, but I mean, obviously, continued meat eating is not conducive to the health of the animals, especially framed within today's topic of universal healthcare. I mean, how universal is universal? Does that include non-human animals as well as us humans? It very well might do one day, and of course, that's something that is discussed frequently in the bioethics communities, mostly the abolition of suffering oriented futurists. And of course, Donald raised a good point about incarcerating drug users, and a lot of drug users are addicts because they have suffered trauma. Um, and if people in positions of power and authority are happy to throw addicts in prison for them to, go through horrendous withdrawals in such an environment surrounded by people, the kinds of people who end up in prison, then that kind of leads me to conclude that they don't really care about the masses' health at all. So who gets to draft the plan for universal healthcare? Who gets to build it? Who gets to sign it off? And will it be these same people? Well, probably. So we have to kind of treat certain groups with political agendas with great suspicion, really. And I think uh, if you know your own body and mind, and you know what helps keep it tick, what helps to keep it running, functioning at its best, then that offers some protection against maybe some harmful suggestions by people saying, "Oh, this is healthy," but they've got an ulterior motive. And it's like in the USA with the pill mills. I don't think it's so as bad now, but there was a time recently where a lot of doctors were giving strong opiate painkillers, like to people quite liberally, like sweets. And of course, a lot of the patients get addicted because a lot of the doctors lied to them, saying, "Oh, this is a non-addictive opiate," like they did with it was hydrocodone, I think. And of course, it was addictive. And a lot of doctors, maybe like certain authorities, put their weight down a bit, and so a lot of doctors just suddenly removed the scripts of these patients, and a lot of them took to the streets to find heroin, of course. So maybe yeah. So that leads me to conclude that a lot of these people in positions of trust, power, and authority don't care about our health. So if we don't allow them to build or draft up the universal healthcare project, then who does?
Thank you. Professor Donald, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, I I think that I can like tie together a little bit of what I said and um, emphasize that in any society, I'm going to steal Adam's line and just say that health is wealth, and that that to the degree that people are unhealthy in our society, um, it 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 lowers our happiness, it lowers our well-being, and it lowers the ability of the society itself to to function well. And if the society you live in is doing well, you do better. And that can be easily seen by looking at the World Happiness Index and looking at the healthiest societies, or, like Finland and places like that, where they do have universal health care, and they do have good education systems, and they do have free universities, and they do have all the kinds of things that they do have they try to have more economic equality so that there isn't huge disparities in income and all the kinds of things that make the society more egalitarian and equal. That's the goal. But if you're in you're a country like Bangladesh or many African countries, and there's many countries in the world that are coming from a place that they haven't been stable enough for a variety of reasons, the environment and political situations and things like that, to have gotten to a point where they can do that, where they can just start working on that. So what what the question that you were asking is how can they develop that? And you asked one question which was about research. And so when we think of research, when we think of someplace at Stanford, well, at Stanford, they're doing research on how that they can change the structure of organisms so that they can like change the structure of DNA and understand the structure of DNA, and so that they can understand the proteins that it makes and understand. They're trying to understand things at this level that requires equipment that's fantastically expensive and expertise that's that very hard, that it takes many years and very specialized training to acquire. And then once they've done that research, to put it into practical use, Stanford is in the middle of this place where they've got Gilead and all these high tech companies that can actually take the knowledge and turn it into something. And to build something like that, the way Silicon Valley got built was over a long number of years. Venture capitalists, and it was a complicated thing that's hard to replicate, and took, it started all the way in the 50s. So to try and do that kind of research would be formidable. But you can do research on the kinds of things that work in a situation like yours, and doing research that's more, in a way, sociological and psychological is just as important as doing the research that Stanford is doing, because in a situation where people are not necessarily as well educated and and there's no infrastructure to provide the care that they need, developing an infrastructure where people have primary care that they trusted primary care, where they have people that if they tell them, look, if you go to the bathroom in a latrine, it's going to save your children, it's going to do all these good things. If you take this vaccine, it's going to do all these good things, and they trust the person, then that is the road to starting to develop a healthy nation. And that has to happen. That has to be universal. I mean, you have to have universal healthcare. And it's not, the sites aren't as glorious as, doing the genetic research that they can do at Stanford, but the results probably affect a lot more people a lot faster than something that they do at Stanford, because it's, there's a lot of people in Bangladesh, and raising all of their boats and making them all healthier is a huge deal. And so the research is incredibly important, but it's a different kind of research. It needs to be done so that you can make the right decisions about what things to address first, and how to make it all work.
Thank you. I'm just trying to share one of the information: top 5 fastest growing economy in the world. Uh, here I'm just sharing the GDP variations in percentage until 2000 from 2021 to 2025. So India will be 7.2, Bangladesh 6.9, Rwanda 6.7, Vietnam 6.7, Cambodia 6.6. So we can expect that when this kind of countries do economic development, and that time they can contribute more for research and innovations, and that is our objective of the World Talent Economy Forum. And definitely, we always negotiate with the developed world that you should invest more uh, in research and innovations for the developing world, and this is the way we can solve complex problem together. Mr. Adam, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Thank you, Sharif. Well, one of my biggest ethical dilemmas concerns painkillers and opiates again, and I ask myself, should should they a be more freely available and accessible if people who are suffering without them become happier people when they consume them, or b should we make opiates even less accessible and available, and thus would that doom more portions of the population to a continued life of chronic and extreme pain if such things were able to treat that. So, and further to the subject regarding psychedelics, like what Donald mentioned, one of the most surprising things that I read about was DMT is believed to be an effective treatment for cluster headaches, which are apparently one of the most painful things a person can experience. So I find it very mystifying why there are all these rules and limitations and restrictions, and yet at the same time, these same kind of medical practitioners um, will allow like 12, 13, 14-year-old teenagers to start going down the gender reassignment avenue. If they are so complicit in letting people alter their bodies, usually irreversibly, and I don't understand why we don't have the same freedom um, with our minds and our mental health and our spiritual health as well. So yeah, those are my concluding remarks. Good topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Today, actually, the Queen Elizabeth died. So, he's the Queen of
Yes.
love, wisdom, and humanity. So, definitely the world and the World Talent Economy Forum will miss the Queen. So, we are praying
Yeah.
for her departure soul. And thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. Thank you. Bye bye and take care.
Bye. See you
Thanks.
Bye
soon.
bye.
See you later.